back to Human Factors Cast. This is episode something, 299, I guess, according to my records. I'm your host, Nick Roome, joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby.
Yo!
And potentially some live guests. Who knows? This is a live recording. This is not something that we have planned out in the normal sort of plan that we normally do for a show. So hopefully this will be great. We're here. We're live. And you brought up AI. You said something about ChatGPT.
Yeah. In fact, well, let's first start as we mean to go on. So this is very much a live show in that anybody can join in the chat. Anybody can get on any of the streams. So whatever or however you're consuming this, if you're consuming it live, drop a message in that chat because you will help scope the show. You will mold what the next hour or so looks like. And so we can start off by saying good evening to Neil, who's joined us in the chat. And I think the idea that you think this is human error might be bold in the fact that you think something's gone wrong. It's not really gone wrong. It just hasn't gone anywhere. We sort of chatted about, an hour or so, maybe a couple of hours ago, where I dropped a chat and said, are we doing it tonight? Yeah, all right then. And here we are. No planning, no forethought. So we are trying and experimenting with new ways of doing things, seeing if we can be more dynamic and more thrilling, living by the seat of our plants and flying on
Part
the
of the plan.
Yeah, it's a new way of looking at things. Do you think I've got us out of it? Do you think that's convincing?
Maybe. I think part of it. I mean, part of it is making the assumption that we come into our normal shows well prepared.
True. Yes.
And we don't always do that. We do that most of the time. But so let's talk about some AI stuff because there's some embarrassing things happening in the AI world. I want to start with the Gemini stuff. Have you seen the Gemini stuff?
Oh, I haven't seen the Gemini stuff. So,
okay. All right. So I'll educate you. I'll send some stuff. There's some let me just say right-wing talking points that have been like AI is erasing white people from history.
Okay, that'll do that.
And this stems from good intentions, but this is human error. Okay, this is human error. So what's happened is Google Gemini, if you ask it to create an image of, let's say, a historical figure like the founding fathers. Okay, that's an example. Like, it won't necessarily do like George Washington or Thomas Jefferson. It won't do those.
Okay.
They've tweaked. Okay, look, like, again, this is a right-wing talking point, so I'm not going to get like super into the weeds here. The idea behind this is very great. It's that Google has coded their GPT, their image generator to be more representative of the folks who use the program. And so you see a much more diverse cast of characters when it generates images. You say, generate this, and it might come back with somebody who's not white.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great because that's diversity and inclusion, especially when it comes to generated images. Because you think about everything that's out there, traditional media is like white dominated. And so what they're trying to do is tweak that algorithm to be a little bit more representative of the true population. And I think that's great. What's happening, though, is when people request images of historical figures,
actual figures, yes,
you'll get like a black Thomas Jefferson, and it's just so they've issued a statement, and I have to find the statement because I do want to read this.
So while you're finding that, just because I only realized this recently, so Gemini is the new Bard, isn't it?
Gemini is the new Bard. Yes, yeah. That's correct. So the official statement here. Geez, where's where's the official statement, because I don't want to misrepresent. This is journalism.
This is journalism live.
Live journalism. So, I mean, another more extreme case is you could say something along the lines of like, show me a World War II German soldier. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the official statement here is looking for it, trying to find it. It's incredibly hard to find, actually. So if anybody has that link available, please let me know.
That's
this is
not
great podcasting. Yes, thanks, Neil. Appreciate that.
Do you sense slight sarcasm there?
Okay, here it is. We're aware that Gemini is offering inaccuracies in some historical image generation depictions. We're working to improve these depictions immediately. Gemini's AI image generation does generate a wide range of people, and that's generally a good thing because people around the world use it, but it's missing the mark here. So, yes, I think
fair enough. At least when things like this are happening, they're picking up. It's a bit like, so the other one that went slightly amok this week has been ChatGPT. One of our constant favorites to go back to. It seems to have had a bit of a minor meltdown where people would be conversing with it and it just starts coming out with gibberish, starts speaking Spanglish without any prompting. It just goes into it, and then this is where I think it's got some people slightly freaked out by suggesting that it's in the room with them, and so some of the messages that you read in the report, it just starts shouting things like "happy listening" at you and things like this. So basically, they had lots of people started reporting it. So OpenAI have noted it as an issue. They haven't really said why it's done this, but they're monitoring it and they're looking at it. Some are suggesting that essentially ChatGPT has a temperature setting.
it does. It does.
Yeah. So if it's low, it tends to behave really normally, rationally, blah blah blah. And if you set the temperature a bit high, then it can be a bit more, I guess, free thinking, a bit more diverse, a bit more unusual. And so people are suggesting, and I think this is guesswork, it's not an actual thing, that the temperature setting have been raised a bit. So it's not the first time that's happened with ChatGPT. It's kind of happened before, and then they've raised it, they've reined it in a bit to make that work. So, but it's interesting to see that there's a number of AI tools that are trying to, or are breaking into the mainstream, are still having issues and bits of meltdown and things like that. So it makes you, certainly from our perspective, from an HR perspective, it does question, how do we know that when we're using it, it's actually giving us good output, or what we consider good output for what we want, and it isn't just basically giving you curveballs because it's going, either its temperature's a bit high or it's just going slightly off the rails. There's nothing we can do that except assume or look at the output that we're getting and being able to understand whether it's good stuff or not.
Right. This would be a good time to check in. Are you still using ChatGPT in some of your day-to-day stuff? Like, because I know we had talked about. Yeah,
Yes,
you are.
Yeah, so I'm playing with it on a number of fronts actually. So one is, I sort of go a bit hot and cold. I tend to use it if time is a massive factor, to try and start thinking and stuff like that. So I'm still using it in that sort of kickstart role that I have done. But one of the things that you've been able to do more recently, I think we might have spoken about it on the last ones, but you can now start creating your own custom GPTs.
Yes.
And so I've been experimenting with, can I get different types of HR practitioner GPTs sorted out? So, for example, human factors integration. So the ability to model a project, look at creating your HFI plan, creating, the evidence for a case report and things like that, to see if I could actually use it as my HFI engineer in the room. So I can chuck in and say, right, I've got this sort of project. And so it'll come back, and the first thing it'll ask you is, right, what's the project name? Who's the HFI lead? And start building in asking you for some of that knowledge to get you some of that elicitation going on, understand who the stakeholders are, and then it'll start then pushing stuff out at you, saying, do you know this information, to start trying fill gaps, and then understand where the gaps in the knowledge are, and therefore understand what phase of the project you're in, and give you some prompts on where you should go and what you should do. So I've been playing with it a bit like that. But equally, and then the integration of some of the imaging now is interesting. I had to go this week at seeing if I could integrate SysML and do some enterprise architecture type stuff with it. Turns out that it can't draw SysML diagrams. They're terrible. But yeah, so I'm still playing with it. I'm probably not as... I keep on having to remember to use it as opposed to it being a huge part of my work stream. But it's sort of one of these things that I sit there and go, I need to do this. I need to do it really quickly. Oh, this is normally what I'd use ChatGPT for. Not right. It's the first tool I go to. So, What about you? Have you gone off it, or have you found other things with it, or is it?
It's fallen off a lot for me in terms of my overall usage. Like, it used to be very much like, how can I build around this? How can I integrate this into workflows and processes? And the more I see of it, the more it breaks in ways that are fascinating. Just say fascinating. But I think because of its infancy, like, I'm still an early adopter. I'm still somebody who follows the trends and is doing active research into the AI space and is excited about it. As a tool, I've stopped using it so much for larger scale things, and it's more like quick requests, which I think is what it's built for, actually. But it's a fancy fancy autocomplete, and when you do these massive prompts, building it up to do something that is not built to do, you gotta have to. It almost takes more time to go back to the thing and try to have a conversation with it to get you the output that you want than it would be to just hammer on the project and get it done. Like, it is one of those things. You mentioned generation of like diagrams. Have you seen, since we're talking about the AI stuff, have you seen Sora?
No, not yet. I've heard about it. I haven't explored it.
Okay, so I think we can show these since they're AI generated, but what I should do here is here I'll go ahead and share some of this. So Sora, the idea behind Sora here, this article comes to us from MIT Tech Review. Sora is a video generation device and or a service. Not a device.
It's an open AI tool, isn't it?
It is an open AI tool, yeah. So this is kind of an extension of GPT, and you can see here this video is like a drone shot of this couple walking through streets of a city, and it's snowing outside, and it looks pretty convincingly real. Okay,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, let's go through the list here. So this is another thing generated by Sora here. This is a little like cute kind of Pixar-y character playing with fire, candle melting. Okay, you got another one here. I'm not sure. Looks like the seafloor, maybe. What is this? Like a stylized seafloor? Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. This is all done with prompting, which is actually really interesting to think about. That you put in a prompt and I'm trying to see some more stuff here. Some mammoths.
I mean, where we use like sort of B-roll in things. I mean, this takes the B-roll generation to a whole new level, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, I'm quite impressed with this. I was also quite impressed with ChatGPT when it came out, and my impression has, like, it's still transformational. Like, let's not be.
Yeah.
I think I have a lot of thoughts on AI and the trends that are happening right now in AI, specifically around adoption of AI in companies and the AI strategy being employed at companies, and how that's maybe not the best option right now. Put it that way. So, lots of thoughts. I don't want to get into them. Not here, not now, but I do have them.
What is interesting on the Sora page, if you go and look at it, they're actually highlighting or recognizing that there are safety issues with what they're now doing. And so they've got an entire section dedicated around saying, basically, we're not going to make Sora available until we are sure that that it's safe to use. They're red teaming it with domain experts in areas like misinformation, hate, content bias, and so they're using red teaming approaches to test it and things like that. So it's good from that perspective that we're learning, or that they're learning about how these things can be deployed, how they should be deployed, and how to keep people safe while we deploy them. But you look at some of the, even just flicking down this page, looking at some of these videos, they are
quite impressive.
They're just. I mean, I'm watching one here around. The prompt is: the camera follows behind a white vintage SUV with black roof rack, and it looks, apart from the spelling on the thing, it still can't spell. But the
Denver.
Yeah, that's the one. I mean, that actually might be a brand name, but I'm assuming it's trying to say Dane. No, I don't know. But the dust being thrown up, the terrain it's going through.
I mean, like, dude, hang on. You know what? As long as we're talking about it, we probably should bring these back up. Let me. So once again, here's the Sora. Here's Sora on OpenAI, and this has a lot more stuff that we can look at here. So this is, and I like that they actually show the prompts here. So this is: a stylish woman walks down a Tokyo street filled with a warm, glowing neon and animated city signage. She wears a black leather jacket, a long red dress, and black boots. And carries a black purse. She wears sunglasses and red lipstick. She walks confidently and casually. The street is damp and reflective, creating a mirror effect of the colorful lights. Many pedestrians walk about. It's crazy to think that this person is not real. This place is not real. This is all generated by AI, and that to me is the interesting part. Like, it's fascinating. Here's the woolly mammoth that we saw. What is this one? A movie trailer featuring the adventures of a 30-year-old spaceman wearing a red wool knitted motorcycle helmet. Blue sky, sail desert, cinematic style, shot on 35mm film. Vivid colors. I mean, this is like, it's pretty cool. Like, you could do some fun stuff with this. Prompt: drone view of waves crashing against the rugged cliffs along Big Sur's Gary Point Beach. Crashing blue waves create white tipped waves.
But again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, in that so much effort needs to be put into prompt engineering. Because you can't just, I mean, you have to curate prompts, don't you? What we've learned quite a lot is you will rarely get the prompt right first time. You need to hone it and make it work for you. And sometimes by the time you've put all the effort into writing the prompt, you could have done it yourself first time.
And it's great for repeatable tasks. If you know you just need to change a few variables for something, and you change those variables and the prompt works, then it's great. But it's like the one-off tasks that it's just not as great for. Photorealistic close-up of two pirate ships battling each other as they sail inside a cup of coffee.
I mean, that is pretty impressive.
A young man in his 20s is sitting on a piece of cloud in the sky reading a book.
Just what it says in the tin.
It does. And I love this one, though. Historical footage of California during the gold rush. I love that. That's crazy.
Yeah. And it does look like a drone shot just going through that type of thing. So, I mean, I think it has proven, considering, I mean, we do talk about AI quite a lot, and I think quite rightly so, because it is evolving, it's doing its stuff.
Well, there's so many human factors with AI. I mean, it truly is sort of this wild west of human factors and how it integrates with humans and technology, and just this fascinating front that we actually discussed this on the show a while back, where we were kind of taking a look at the bleak the bleak 2023 and the outlook for 2024, and kind of looking at what the trends were. Do you remember that episode? Because I do. We talked about some of the things that Jacob Nielsen was talking about in terms of where the trends are going, and AI is definitely one of them. And people are going to be looking for folks who have been researching AI, because there are so many points of failure for AI.
It is, but it's also organizational as well, isn't it? I mean, if you remember a friend of the show, Kate Preston, when she came on, and she's currently doing her PhD in the use of AI in the health sector, or more specifically around hospitals. And one of the big takeaways that she keeps on coming back to is that actually the AI can do an awful lot of stuff. As you know, we use it in various amounts to do really cool stuff. But unless the organization is ready to use it, then you're never going to exploit it to its full or anywhere near its full potential. You get pockets of people using it to maybe do, kind of what we've done in the past, like do generation of scripts, generation of, largely not, I'm not going to call it inconsequential, but when you consider the power of what it could do, we still going to do in some quite mundane things. And unless the organization is ready to actually adopt some of this stuff, we're nowhere near it. The other big winner in the AI thing, actually, which we've never really talked about, is the chip companies behind it, and that's come to the fore this week with Nvidia. Their stock price jumped 16% this week, and this was suggested on LinkedIn by my good friend David Thompson to talk about it. And literally, I'd put the prompt on LinkedIn saying, right, we're having a chat tonight, give us some topics to talk about. He literally just come back with Nvidia exclamation mark. So I went back to him and said, what about them? And it wasn't until I then did a quick search, and he was like, actually, they've had a massive cost boost. And it's really interesting that them in particular, because I'm suffering from the lack of a decent NVIDIA graphics card to produce some of my podcast stuff, which I didn't realize how much I was relying on the NVIDIA publisher suite and some of the background tools to make what I was doing more efficient. And now I've got a new desktop box that is a small form factor, so I can't get a full-size graphics card in there. I can't get a decent RTX graphics card, therefore I can't use half the NVIDIA tools. It's just really, really interesting seeing how that has flown through. So NVIDIA is one of the big chip makers who are benefiting from this surge in artificial intelligence, because we need powerful processing chips to push some of this stuff out.
Okay, we got a really interesting one here on LinkedIn.
Oh, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, that's
Trevor.
So right, Trevor Dobbins, again, good friend of ours, and I recently interviewed him on 1202. He's asking thoughts on how to use AI in defense behind the firewall. So the biggest, actually, there is lots of work going on in the UK defence side of things. There's a organisation that's out there called the Defence AI Centre, which you can find. They've been pushing some stories out on LinkedIn about what they've been doing. Fundamentally, it's about the sharing of knowledge within defense behind the firewall that the AI can learn from, and how they can control that, how they can trust that. I think I'm probably not going to be amazing anybody with my massive intellectual insight when I say that there's a lot of issues within the defense realm, and I think no matter which country you look at, not every just because they're with the UK defense or US defense, even within all these people, there's that we don't share information easily. And so when we want to use AI for either analytics or anything like that, we can't use it efficiently because we don't share the information. If we could find the ways of sharing information, even common information within defense, then we could use AI because it would then learn. It would be able to learn about this stuff. But you've got the issues on the need to know aspect. How do we make sure that AI only knows what it needs to know, and therefore the people who can access the information?
Yeah, here's another point that goes exactly with what you're saying here, Barry. I find it unable to provide citations to what information it gives. It relies on open data only. And so, yes, I agree. I think that's absolutely right. That there's multiple ways in which we could dissect this AI and defense conversation. One of which is, how do you use AI as a human factors researcher in your process and tools? And then there's I think the larger issue of, how do you communicate with and use AI as a tool for various defense capabilities? And that's a tricky one to talk about.
Certainly, the first one is a bit easier. So, how to use AI as an HF tool? Because we're kind of doing it already. As long as you're really cognizant of the material you're feeding in and making sure that it is not classified, or you can talk around an issue to ChatGPT in such a way that you're not putting any restricted or confidential information into it, you can get the sort of output you're looking for. Because really, what we're looking for is in terms of process and things like that. The only way to go to the second point that you made, and I'm going to tread slightly carefully, is if we want to use AI to get the best out of data within the defense boundary, so behind the firewall, the AI has to sit behind the firewall, and it has to have access to that data, and otherwise you're not going to get the use out of it. And therefore, if you're not going to trust it with the information to make it worthwhile, there's no point in doing it, one would suggest. And it's going to be tricky. It's going to be really, really difficult because it's not just a technical issue. Because we could build an AI. In fact, AIs do exist that work within boundaries. That's fine. It's whether it's that human machine trust issue. So the trust in that human machine teaming piece, which is why it's such a popular subject now, around how you trust the output you're getting, but that the system is working within the bounds and it hasn't leaked out anywhere, or it's not leaking information, because that's risky. Knowledge is power, quite literally. So, yeah, I think that it's an absolutely fascinating question that Trevor's brought up, because there are so many facets to it once you start unpicking it.
There really is. It's like,
it's just not just technical.
The whole cybersecurity issue. How do you make sure that the person accessing whatever AI system is the person that needs to be, right? You can get around that through various forms of verification, but then also like the diffusion of responsibility for decisions that are made. If an AI were to recommend a decision in defense, I'm being very vague here intentionally, but if an AI system were to recommend a course of action in defense and a decision maker followed through with that course of action and it led to terrible outcomes, who would be at fault? Would it be the human, or would it be the AI, or would it be the company who made the AI, or where does the liability stand? And I think for a lot of those reasons, you're not seeing that's the human trust piece of it. Can the human trust the output of the AI in that it is a great decision? Are there things that the human has knowledge of that the AI system does not have knowledge of that sort of I guess peppers the judgment of the outcome from the AI system? Like there's so many things here. If a thing were to do a thing. Yeah.
One of the ways I abstract it out at the moment when I've been working with this problem recently is the Google Maps analogy. So when satellite navigation first started coming out, or just even mapping route finding tools, you would put in the route, you put where you wanted to go, and you would check that route. It would give you the route from A to B, and you would go, well, actually, I wouldn't go that way. I would do this. I would do that. When Google first started giving it the things, if it sent you a way that you weren't sure about, you would go the way that you knew, because you didn't trust it. It might send you down silly roads and this, that, and but as it's now getting better and it's becoming more normal to use it, you now just trust the Google. You now just trust where it's going to send you. You rarely, even if you know the route, you tend to use language like, oh, well, it must know traffic, it must have a reason why it's sending me down this route. And the analogy here is that right now, if we were to use AI in defense quite seriously, or more so than say we are at the moment, you're going to have that bit where people, quite right, are not going to trust the new technology. They're going to check it. They're going to back it up. They're going to drill into, right, why did you give me that answer? Why have you made the decision that you've made? Fast forward 5 years, 10 years maybe, and we're then into that situation of what you were hypothesizing on was it spits you out an answer, go do this, and you don't challenge it. You just say, oh, it must have told me to do it for a good reason. That's why we're using these tools. It's to speed up decision making. It's to do this, that, and the other. This system told me to go and do this, so I've gone and do it. And you could have some quite significant consequences. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be quite the ride.
Oh, it's so fun to talk about defense and skirting the issues, and
yeah.
Good questions.
I'm trying to work out whether we can dive into that deeply with it without me losing my security clearance. I don't think we can. I think we've kind of short of me losing my job. But I think it is going to be an interesting 5 or 10 years because, like I say, the technology is pretty much getting there. It's now the human issues that we need to deal with.
Yeah.
And also things like it not having meltdowns.
I know there's at least in I can't say what the training. I do know that there's like already AI awareness training. This is a good change of subject here, Barry. Do you want to get into this? I like this change.
It'll get us out of some awkward conversations.
It'll get us out of a tight spot. Thank you so much, Dibs. I love this. All right, Dibs on YouTube. Here's a different track. What industries do you think human factors should or could move into that we don't currently? This is interesting and fascinating for so many reasons because in some cases you don't know that human factors is being applied. If it's being applied correctly, then you don't maybe notice it as you should. Maybe we could talk about things that we know of. I felt the clearance demon circling. Thanks, Dibs.
I mean, So there's one area which I think is fascinating. There is bits of HF being done in it already, but it's still relatively immature, and that's the farming and agriculture industry.
Mm.
There is, because when you think about it, historically, farms were run by people, by families, handed down from father to son, mother to daughter, that type of thing. So it would be the farms would be handed on. As technology has evolved, and historically there was always hundreds of people working on a farm. You'd have everything was manual labor, from ploughing to planting to everything was done by people all of the time in all weathers, 365 days a year, and that's like animals, all that sort of stuff. We now have the case where there's so much automation going on in the farming industry. So the use of tractors, where you've got large bits of machinery ploughing fields. So one person can plough like not just one field in a day, but multiple fields in a day, but to prep them and then sow them and do all that sort of stuff. And that's even getting more automated, as they can use GPS to make sure that they get really good tight seeding and things like that. But as we get more and more automation, bigger machinery doing things, we have less people within a particular farm, within a particular space. They now have less people. So if there's an accident, there's actually less people around to raise the alarm. It's harder to get help to people, and typically the accidents they have, because it's involving big dangerous machinery, blades and crushing things and big bits of metal, the injuries tend to be quite severe. So there is some research going on. So I did a interview on 1202 with a PhD student called Jill Boots, who's done work into this historically, and because of that interview and listening to one of her lecturers, a lady I believe called Amy Irwin, researching in this area, I just find it thoroughly fascinating. And then Dibs has come back in the chat saying they've spoken to farmers about this. It is one of the most dangerous injuries, but it's hard to get the message across. It is cultural as well as anything else. And I think that's true because, again, going back to the point I made at the start, where it's their family businesses. They're family businesses that are handed down. So the training hands down. It's not like there's comparatively few people go, when they're growing up, just randomly go and buy a farm and start farming. It's something you're born into. And so there's all of the issues that has when it hands down. What's your thoughts on the farming industry, Nick? Are you a burgeoning farmer in
I'm not a burgeoning farmer, but I am pro human factors in agriculture. We've actually done an episode on this. I believe it was like close to 200 that we talked about smart farms. And that was a fantastic episode. I really enjoyed so much that I remember it. That says a lot. It's an interesting discussion because you're right. There's, with all this automation going on, how do you get the farmers involved in, or even farm hands involved in process and improving those process, and for safety reasons, for usability reasons, X, Y, and Z. I think that's really interesting. To answer the original question, I think there's a couple other industries that I actually really feel passionate that human factors could benefit from. The first thing that came to my mind was legal.
Okay. Yeah. Expand.
Okay. So how many times have you read like a terms of service or gotten a legal document or something and nothing is clear?
Yeah.
There could be like a ton of, I'm just thinking about making things easier for the end person, like understanding what the consequences of not paying this thing is, or, what happens if you don't show up to court, or making court process easier, making law easier to understand, not only for those who participate in judgment and witness and testimony, but also for defendants, everybody involved. I think there's so many opportunities with legal that, from lawyers to attorney, like everybody who's involved in this process, there's so many things going on that human factors could really have a huge impact on. So that's the first thing I thought. And I also, construction is another one that I thought of, but it's great to see in the comments here. Dib said, construction is the one that I'm trying to break into at the moment. So that's great. I'm glad you're trying to break into construction, because construction is another thing. You can imagine the safety of not only the tools and the equipment that they use on site, but also the process and procedure by which the project managers of a construction site start to organize all that stuff. The other thing that I immediately thought of, Barry, and I'm surprised that you didn't bring this up, is environmental conservation and sort of the human factors of green energy and climate change and all those things, right? So I think you actually had an effort on this a while back. How's that effort going? Is it still an ongoing thing? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the whole issue around climate economics is still ongoing. We've got in fact, I've got a PhD student about to start with me to study support for episodic thinking and climate change. So there is definitely work going on around that, and I'm working with Professor Andrew Thatcher from South Africa, part of the IEA, and we're currently writing a chapter of a book on climate economics and how we can do something with it. So yes, the climate thing that's possibly why I didn't think of it straight away, because I kind of think I'm already there. But then I would. So yes, that is definitely going on. But again, it's one of these things, and that links to one of the other areas that I would like to see human factors get more involved in, and that's just government in general, government decision making and government delivery.
Policy, yeah.
Absolutely. The way that we get elected representatives to see, hear, and represent people, their constituents, etc., etc. I think they could do with a healthy dose of understanding user engagement, understanding how work is described, work is done, all that sort of stuff. I think is something that the government could do a lot more of and would benefit from. So yeah, that was
the policy side, because when I think of government, I think of like, oh well, DoD has a bunch of policy and procedure that they have human factors standards, but when you talk about sort of government representation, yes, absolutely, there's ways in which human factors can affect policy, and I think there's been some large strides here in stateside, at least, and not in the UK necessarily, but Neil, who's in the chat right now, who I talked to at HFES last year, talked a lot about the GRC and how they're doing some good work to represent human factors as a science when it comes to policy making. And so that's a great effort that we're doing here. I don't know if anything could be kicked up and spun up like that in the UK, but worldwide, we need more of that representation. We need a seat at the table because, yeah, from the legislative side, how you manage with them and how the legislative side should function more is what Neil says in chat here. I also want to, since we're talking about Neil, he made a funny here, and I laughed. I have to call attention to it. Other industries that human factors could be influential or what was the original question? Impactful to is commercial or recreational submarines.
Like 2 episodes on that. Yes, you're not wrong. But actually, one of the big takeaways from that was around legislation again, was the fact that recreational submarines are not regulated in any way, or in any meaningful way that meant that this could happen. So yeah, it's regulation is everything. Dibs, as I like again, the human factors of PMQs. So Prime Minister's Questions we have in the UK. So every Wednesday at lunchtime, there is I think it's an hour session for any parliamentarian to ask the Prime Minister questions. And the leader of the opposition gets 6 questions. The leader of the SNP, I think, gets 2 questions. And basically they can throw any questions at them, and it ends up just being more of a pantomime than it does. You get meaningful answers, or you don't even really get meaningful questions. It's stuff that is people trying to make headlines out of it. So yes, probably avoiding the human factors elements of that is probably a good idea. Or as we've seen this week in our parliament, actually, the balance of power is really quite an interesting observation, but this is more psychology than it is HF itself, because we had our entire parliament breakdown last night in a way that I've just never seen before. That they couldn't, for the reason for somebody trying to do the right thing, in this case the Speaker of the House, could end up quite losing his job because of it. Which was just fascinating. So yeah, I could talk about that for hours, but that'll be absolutely very little to do with HF and more about my utter fascination with politics.
Oh yeah,
which we have explored in the past.
We have explored that, and that's a fascinating discussion too. Oh man, that's a good topic. I'm trying to think of other areas in which those are the two that immediately stuck out to me, was the climate ergonomics and the law. And I think those stuck out to me because it's not immediately apparent if work is being done there, especially from like a consumer side of law. Like, I don't know, you get all these like it's tax season, so you get all these tax forms. Like, what do I owe? You know what I owe you. Why is all this, like, that's half policy, half law, half like. But then the law comes down when you don't pay it right. So I'm just thinking, like, there's got to be anyway. So those are the things that I thought of. But some of the stretch things that I thought of, but I know are being considered, is like education or ed tech. And I know we've breached this, and I know there's work being done in that space. Maybe I just bring it up because I'm fascinated by it and would love to learn more. But I think there's really some roadblocks when it comes to like children's human factors that are mostly due to experimental IRB regulations and stuff. So you can't like test processes and procedures without going through an IRB, and because they're a protected population, the risk of engaging in an experiment has to be outweigh the. And so when you're experimenting on a child, and education is at stake, it's like test what is versus something else. And the risk is that the something else intervention is going to make the child worse off than if they had just continued on. And so that risk has to be mitigated in as many ways as it can be. And so because of that, I think there's probably not as much research done in the education space. But that's another interesting one to me, is like, how can we use human factors in education and outreach?
I was thinking, what about the music industry? So people playing musical instruments. I mean, I've seen. So my son is doing learning drumming at the moment. Drumming is very loud, therefore it's not necessarily great on the old hearing, and should be wearing ear defenders when he's drumming because it's very loud. But also posture when you're sat at the drum kit, or you've got your brass instrument of choice slung around your body, your guitar. When you're sat at the piano or the keyboard, are you sat at the right height, and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, as I started unpicking it, they're mostly physical and what you call like traditional ergonomics. There's a lot of stuff there to play with, but then you get into when you bands. So then you're talking about collaboration and teaming and all that sort of stuff. So you're looking at them sort of relationships and things like that as well. Is there stuff there that we could unpick? I don't know what the answer is.
Here's a call for the community. Does anybody in the human factors community know of a human factors practitioner band? I would love to like commission a human factors only band to like write an original human factors cast intro song. That would be so awesome.
What would you call a human factors band? The Ergos.
The Ergogos.
The Ergo Go-Go's.
How about Ergo Go-Go's? You call it user error?
Yeah. What type of band would it be? Would it be a sort of a nice, easy listening, or is it sort of a frustrated heavy rock?
Heavy,
the world's biggest heavy
death metal. Death
Yeah.
metal. Yeah, I can imagine. Hang on. Well, here's speaking of AI, let's bring it back. What would give me 10 names? 10 great names for a band who does human factors.
Oh, I would say ChatGPT's got to be able to write some lyrics as well. I was writing an article for The Ergonomist and got it to write some jokes for me. They were terrible.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I got it
to
write poetry as well, and that wasn't any better. Whilst you're waiting for that to come up, the other, I guess, slightly more serious one. Okay. Let's not do serious stuff. Let's crack. Let's. What names have you got?
Cognitive load.
That works. Okay.
Feedback loops.
Nah, that's boring.
Prototype punk. Gesture gestalt. Yes, I really like cognitive load and are there folks that do a jam session at HFBS? That'd be great if they made a band and did that. The interface incident.
Cognitive load still seems to be
I like cognitive load. If anyone wants to take that band name and run with it, I'm giving you permission since I didn't make it. ChatGPT did.
So another area that I think would be worth looking at is the prison service, because the way that you have to, what you're doing is actively restricting somebody's liberty, and so that in of itself is a big deal. But if you're restricting their liberty and having to do things like restrain them and things like that, how are you making sure that you are, you've got to look after people whilst you're doing that, Yes, Martin, it does. Yes.
Chat's on fire tonight. You guys are great. Thank you tonight. This is amazing. The comments tonight have just been top notch. Thank you. You're making me laugh a whole lot. I appreciate this. Martin says, sounds like a grinder handle. Probably to cognitive load.
Which reminds me, Martin, yes, I am coming up next week. We need to pick a day next week to get together. Just had to throw that out there, but for public interest. Except Wednesday.
All right, so yours...
Mysteries effect. Oh. We've been doing over an hour already. Do you realize that?
I do. Yeah. No, it's great. Hang on. As we're paused here, just another quick reminder. Hey, if y'all want to be part of the conversation, video on or not, you don't need to. You don't even need a great mic. If you just want to be here with us talking about some of this stuff, there's a little QR code right up here that lets you be a caller. There's a little private chat. Once you get in, you can let us know what you want to talk about. camera on or off, and we'll chat with you in that before you're even on here. So don't worry, it's not going to throw you right on the show. If you want to be part of the conversation tonight, you can do so right here. Otherwise, you can leave a chat like y'all have been doing. That has been great so far. And the last thing I'll mention, that if you want to yell obscenities into a void, or your thoughts on any of the human factor stuff tonight, you can leave us a voicemail. We might talk about it on next week's show. So you can get to either of those links right up there as a QR code. I'm going to bring up the Be Alive caller one more time, and I'll leave that up there. All right. I think that about covers it. All right, what now?
Where did we get to? We were still so we were talking about you and different fields for a so could you flip it? What fields would you just not apply human factors to? I know we sort of say you can apply human factors to everything, and that's kind of the given. But if there's a field that you just turn around and say, well, actually, no, we're just not going to provide any value to it, what would be one that you would choose?
Space exploration.
Why? Interesting.
We don't need any of that.
Well, no, that's the field overall. I mean, that's just it's just
we don't need it there. No, okay. That was a sarcastic remark. I'm sorry, it didn't land. I don't know. Let me think about that for a second. Let me think about if we were to eliminate human factors from any industry, what industry would we eliminate it from? Is that
pretty much? Oh, pretty much, yeah. Oh, and nobody would notice the difference. Which is, I think, slightly different. So there's, in fact, you could argue with most things that people don't notice the difference. I'll possibly pose something a bit harder than I thought was going to be to answer, because I was thinking about things like, whilst we talk about agriculture, just growing vegetables in your allotment, but then you've got how you tend to the plants and things, and that's
let me rephrase your question just a little bit.
Go on then.
If you were to apply it to a global industry, something that's worldwide, that would have an impact on a lot of people, but would maybe not understand the connection of human factors being applied in that industry to their own circumstance. Does that make sense? So the example I'm trying to get at here is like supply chain logistics. Okay? You apply human factors to it, it works out better.
Yeah.
People might notice supply chain is better in the sense that things are on shelves, but they won't really recognize that human factors was the reason why. They might just think the trucks were late, or X, Y, and Z. And so that might be one industry where you have this worldwide thing happening that human factors is a part of, but is not necessarily like observed by the end user of supply chain logistics, who could be anybody.
Yeah.
And I think the same could be said for
isn't that true? I mean, I would throw that back and say, isn't that true of anything that we do? Because you could argue, you could take HF out of any project, and the project's not going to stop. And that's the problem we've got, isn't it? That's the constant argument. Because you only notice, I guess it's the kind of argument I was making, is you only notice HF when things go wrong. If you've done HF well, you don't know it's been there. Nobody goes, oh, that was such a beautiful interface to work with, unless you're an HF UXer. Is really interesting. Because now that we're playing around with this, there's lots of examples, I think, exactly like the one you just described, that we make it better, but would still go ahead without us, because it has done for many years. Cheese production. But if you're producing cheese in a factory, then we're down to factory thing. If you're producing cheese just in your own back garden type of affair, you'd have to have a big garden, obviously. That's interesting. Esports.
I saw esports too, and I'm wondering how, because UX is done in games, maybe not as efficiently as it could because of the gaming industry, but engagement. I've thought about engagement and like media as a human factors issue as well. And I tie engagement and media together. I know they're separate, but I bring them up together because media is built off of engagement or consumption of their output. It is more entertainment now than it is true reporting. At least that's my feeling on it. It's a whole mess that probably should be addressed at some point, but engagement is interesting.
What about just pure journalism, full stop?
Journalism. Mm-hmm.
So journalism would not actively. You could not. I don't think you could go to a journalist and say, if we apply human factors principles to journalism, we would make their job better.
No, it might make their job harder.
Yeah, when
but the end user, the consumer, us, we would benefit from it.
Would we? I mean, and anybody in the chat correct me as well. I cannot think of what would you apply from an HF perspective to a journalist, to them doing their finding a story, getting a story, doing it, and putting the story out there. How would we make what they do better? I don't think we could. Without taking, because you could argue journalism is an art form. Therefore, okay, I like that. So Dibs has just come up with the error side of things. So the reason, right? So if they get things, do we add things in there for their fact checking to make sure that they're not telling? I mean, God forbid that we ever suggest that journalists tell lies.
Training.
The software that they use, that's true. Yes. So if they're using word processors and search techniques and all that sort of stuff, you're right. Yes, usability and UX.
Training.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Training.
Journalistic integrity.
I'm still trying to get down to that bare bones of their job, though, of them going to squirrel out the they've got the smell of a story. They go and do research. So how they do research, we can make the research more efficient, I guess. Their research processes, because they need to do the fact checking, they need to do all that sort of stuff. How they obviously when they then put the story together, then they use the software and things like that. So that's something. So yeah, you've all just quite happily shot my my idea out.
This is a great discussion. I love this. More of shooting Barry down, please. This is
well. I then used the idea of journalists because it's artistic. Therefore, would we improve artists?
I absolutely think you can improve artist work by applying human factors. Exhibit 1, traditional ergonomics, paintbrush. Can you make a paintbrush more efficient by applying ergonomics to it? I think the answer is yes. I think an art station, yes. The output, maybe not so much, but the output is a product of the input that went into it. And so if you're using tools to assist in your artwork.
But I've never seen on Amazon that Bastion of Truth. Everybody sells ergonomic chairs. All ergonomic pens. I've never seen, I don't think, an ergonomic paintbrush.
All right, let's look for it. Let's do a live search.
Leading to the argument that actually, if nobody's been able to make some like really quick bucks off a just chucking the word ergonomic in front of a paintbrush and coming up with a really radical design,
it's an autocomplete in my Google search.
Of course it is. I've now got an image of like maybe a paintbrush that wraps around your finger, or something like that. So,
Well, here's the most sort of extreme example that I can find. It looks kind of like a pistol grip.
Okay.
Here, I'll share an image so that way we can all get a visual on this.
Whilst you're doing that, just to loop back to the journalist one, both Dibs and Martin have come around and highlighted journalism is storytelling, interviewing, interrogation, narrative structure, and things. So, oh, that looks like one of the different types of mouse you can get, isn't it? With that sort of, so you're pushing the web of your the web of your thumb into it.
Yeah. So maybe not necessarily for art projects, but if we're talking about art, I absolutely think that the tools and processes that we use to create art, if they have human factors influence on those products, then that directly impacts the outcome of the art. Because if you're more comfortable creating art, that creates a different mindset for you as you're creating this piece of art.
True.
And the opposite is true too. If you use something that is abrasive to use, your art might come out differently because it gives you a different feeling when you use it. And so, okay, yep, there it is.
Thanks, Martin. Somebody had to win the prize. You're there. Fair play.
You know what? He brings up an interesting point though, and I'm gonna say this word: teledildonics. And I think there's an amazing opportunity for human factors in that space, and just that whole adult entertainment, products.
Yes.
I think there's an amazing, like, there's a lot, like, I bring this story up every once in a while, but there was a I don't want to specify how I know this person. They worked on an adult website and they could not show
we've talked about this,
their work in their portfolio, and so they replaced all the thumbnail images of the website that they worked on with kittens, and of course, changed everything. And it was a kitten website that you could go and watch cute cats on. So there is work being done on it.
There's all I'll say is that there is a 1202 interview that I'm trying to secure at the moment, and it'll be the first time I would have to put an E on the I'd have to put an explicit on the on the episode, because I just think it's fascinating, and I think I saw a this sounds really bad. So I think on YouTube, all about
it's YouTube. It's probably fine.
About user testing. That was just that I was like, that's just brilliant. That's exactly what we're doing. I would love to do like a conference paper on this and go and present it at like EHF 25 or something. Probably would have not like past president anymore. I don't bring the whole organization disrepute. I just think it would be interesting. Yes, exactly that. Neil, just the use of quote is very apt. But yeah, so if that, I can say if that comes off, that sounds very wrong. If this interview happens, then I'll let you know whether we actually get to publish it or not. It'll be fun.
Okay, so we've found a lot of industries.
I say we were talking about stuff before Martin took us off at a tangent.
What were we talking about? Oh, we were talking about sort of art as an output of human factors. Yes, yeah.
We were there because actually, Dib sort of mentions about miniature painting. So, different thing, and the picture you put up. I used to do a fair bit of the Warcraft, the miniatures, painting them, and I had devices that you could then use, because holding the miniatures is quite hard work. But it was like a thing that you could put the base into, and it actually gives you a handle to then use to be able to move the piece around so you can paint it. So that is using the use of tools to make.
Yeah, when I craft, I use helping hands to solder. Like that's another tool, and that's part of my art. Another example here. Think about digital art. Okay, you use Adobe Photoshop or Microsoft Paint. There's a difference in the tool that you use and the caliber of output that you're able to get with those tools. Which is why when you look at some of the Microsoft Paint drawings, and it's like, wow, that's really impressive that you did that in Paint.
Yeah.
Because of the caliber of tool, and you know that there's UX research going into those things, and so I would argue that there's some fundamental human factors principles being applied to those tools as the artist is using those tools to express themselves. So I think, that's really interesting too. Fascinating. Well, I'll tell you what, this has been a pretty great discussion. I think maybe we'll wrap up what the episode should be, and we'll do a little post. Yeah, I mean, like that was a great conversation for an episode, and we'll put a little bow on that. We'll keep going here for a little bit, but oh geez, it's been so long since we've done this. I need to find my outro stuff. Again, we're not going anywhere. We'll still be here. I'm just going to say a little outro for the podcast, but you all true believers here sitting here live with chat, you stick around. We'll still be here. Notes. I got to find my show notes.
All right. It's been a minute.
It has been a whole month, in fact. All right. Well, that's it for today, everyone. If you like this episode, enjoy some of the discussion around human factors, topics of interest, go listen to some of our other episodes, especially like the agriculture one. That's a good one to listen to since we talked a little bit about that. Comment wherever you're listening with what you think of our topic this week. For more in-depth discussion, you can always join us on our Discord community. Visit our official website, sign up for our newsletter, stay up to date with all the latest human factors news. Find out about it as we do. If you like what you hear and want to support the show, there's a couple things you could do. 1, leave us a 5-star review wherever you're watching or listening. Tell your friends about us. That truly helps the show grow. And 3, if you have the financial means to, and don't mind us being gone every once in a while, there's a little, you can support the show on Patreon. As always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. Barry Kirby, thank you for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about teledildonics?
That's going to be the future episode, hopefully. But you can find me talking to interesting people in the human factors community, and we've actually got episodes up this year. It's amazing. You can go and find us at 1202podcast.com. And if you want to come chat to me personally, then find me on all the socials, Baz_K, and other variations on that.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me across social media at Nick_Roome. If you want to tune in for a little bonus conversation, go and find our full discussion on YouTube, Twitch, any of the streaming platforms, LinkedIn as well. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the AT&T, T-Mobile carrier outage that happened today. So go check that out for a post show. I said as for me, and thanks again for tuning in to Human Factors Cast. Until next time, it depends.